Today's conversation and topic is about really wrapping up the year and planning for next year. And anytime we can talk about where we can infuse some of our best practices, some of our learnings, if you will, from the year, this is the best time to do it. I think a lot of times in our profession as accountants, we'll often go into the vacation mode and sort of settle down. But I think the one thing that I want everyone to consider is this is really a prime opportunity for our entrepreneurial clients to kind of set the stage to help ease some of the January, February rush. And we all know, we've all been there when talking about and looking at what year end looks like. And, I'm really committed to being at the source of how my day and my life goes, as opposed to reacting to how my day and my life goes. Now, I have certainly, just when I get mastery and that perfect balance, I'll add something and it'll create chaos. So it lasts for about a minute sometimes, but what I found is, and one of the best practices I'm going to share with you today are ways to design and plan your time in such a way that we're not as reactive and reacting to what's going on with our clients and our schedule. And it just takes a little bit of, working on the business as opposed to working in the business. And this is the perfect time of year to do that. So one of the things that I want to do is challenge the way that we think about this time of the year. A lot of times people think, oh, well, clients aren't going to want to work with me because it's the holiday and everyone's in holiday season and they're not going to want to do anything. And one of the things that I find to be very true when I work with entrepreneurs, or work with anybody really, is a lot of times they look to me to give them guidance, to say, these are the times we want to do X and these are the times we want to do Y. And if I can give them a good, valid reason for doing so, and it's well organized, and I give them enough advance notice, then these things can really work out to the benefit of everyone. So I'll share first just a couple of things that are, I think, very specific, technical, practical best practices, and then I'll shift into things that are more strategic and what will make your job and your life easier going into 2016, lessons learned, to help be less reactive and have a better sense of your ability to control your time and have a say on where it goes. As moms, you guys have probably mastered the art of juggling 50 things at once. And so no better audience than the mompreneurs that we have in this community to really begin to cultivate this practice and teach others how this works, and so that we don't get into situations of overwhelm and we don't overbook ourselves and start reacting to everything. So what I'm going to do, Megan, I'm going to ask you to mute the line except for me, just in case, because I've heard a little bit of typing in the background. And then we'll unmute everybody in a little bit of Q&A, and I'd love to also have other people share after I'm done with my little piece on some of the best practices and things that you've learned. So first and foremost, what happens this time of year? And when I think of what happens at this time of the year, I like to also think about what's coming next. So what's coming next? All right, well, January. What's January in our world? January in our world is year-end close, 1099s, and if you're doing payroll services, you've got W-2s. Now, we generally prefer that payroll services be done and managed by a third-party payroll service provider, but there are some who are doing their own payroll services. So these are like the probably number one things that are predictable and what's going to happen. So if we haven't already established really great processes, procedures, and systems and agreements with our clients to change their behaviors so that they are religiously collecting W-9s from all of their vendors before they issue their first payment, then December is absolutely the best time of the year to get that flat, get that handled. And so what can we do? So I encourage all of us to go through proactively all of our clients and take a look at where they are. Now, if you're doing the books and you have access to their books, then you want to obviously run the 1099 mapping system if you're in QuickBooks, whatever tool that you have for the accounting system that you're working with the client. And you really want to assess and evaluate, are all of the EIN numbers, are all the W-9s that should have been collected, and take that step early in the month, in the first week of December, and get a framework of where you are so that this is not only not a surprise or a rush or a mad dash for you, it's also not a mad dash for your client and for their vendors. So keeping in mind that most people go fairly dark the last week to potentially 2 weeks of the month, if you do that the first week of December, and then you start to be in communication with all your clients, generating lists of things that are missing, things that need to be collected, take that time and that opportunity to teach and train them to alter their behavior and teach them that this isn't a practice that is normally supposed to occur in the month of December. This is something that happens every single time a new vendor is created. Actually, and technically, there's a rule out there that no one that I'm aware of even follows. Perhaps somebody, some of the folks on this team are doing it, but technically we're supposed to report all new vendors as those vendors are contracted with. Before you even pay them, there's an actual filing with the IRS that says, hey, report all your new vendors. And I don't remember which form it is, but I know that there is a report that does this. So, barring that, they absolutely expect and issue penalties in the absence of issuing timely W-9s, issuing timely 1099s and 1096s that occur in the following year. So what else can you be planning for? So now you've done the search, you've done the mapping, you've identified anything that's missing, you've got a system for, you've helped that client create a system for collecting W-9s and storing them. So maybe it's Google Drive, maybe it's within the hosting provider or some other systematic way that the client understands this is where they need to be stored. You have access to that, and you can be consistently adding that information on an ongoing basis. So now the client now has a list of items to be following up on, but what can you do? Where is your role? So now you've given them a list. Is your job done? Is it over? Well, it depends on how you consider your position in your role. The reality is you're probably going to project manage this. There's a gap in perception versus reality. Is it your job, if you've been hired to be their controller, to chase them and their vendors for W-9s? No. Well, maybe not. But the reality is, if not you, who? And for you to actually fulfill on and provide the service that's expected, it really do want to set up the expectation now that your role really will be to project manage this. So you'll want to quarterback this whole process. You'll want to make sure that you set by when dates. So here's the list. I need this by a specific date. And if you're not already doing this with your clients, if you're not already saying, here's a list of things that I need, and this is the date by which I need it. If this time frame doesn't work for you, please suggest another date. It's always good, and it's always a great practice to set a by when date. To say, here's a list, I need it back, and not specify when you need it back, you can pretty much guarantee that it's not going to happen in the time frame that you're really looking for. So in these things, you want to set short timelines because you want to have enough time to get whatever information you may be missing or the contact information for the vendors if it's not already available to you, so that you can follow up directly with the vendors to get the information or support your client in doing so. The best way is to support your client in doing it. And to the extent that you can have all your W-9s in the door and teach your client why some people need to get W-9s and why some don't. Always use these opportunities as opportunities to train and develop your client. Anywhere you can do that, you are going to add value to them. The whole process of issuing 1099s is probably one of the most unclear things right after legal structures to most entrepreneurs. So this is a very simple, free way to add value and to increase your connection and engagement with your client. And so teach them about the fact, you know, what makes someone eligible for a 1099. And if you yourself are not clear about those rules, we could talk about them a little bit later in the call if you'd like, but there are lots and lots of resources. If you just Google it and go to the IRS site, it'll give you all the specifications, you know, $600 of payments in the year. And they, you know, where it gets trickier is if they're organized as a corporation, typically they don't get a 1099, with certain exceptions though. LLCs, most single member LLCs will get a 1099. If you're paying rent, you actually issue 1099s to your landlords. Attorneys get 1099s. So there are exceptions, in understanding what those rules are and freshening up your understanding, regardless of your role on the team, is actually just a really simple thing to do and a great value add. So knowing, making sure the mapping is done, making sure that the system is in place, and making sure your client is trained are all really great practices. Now, when do you want to get all this handled? Well, if you can get all your W-9s in by, say, the 15th-ish of December, then you can spend the rest of the month getting everything organized, getting everything situated, so that you can literally just hit a button in the first week of January. Now, what would it be like? I just want you guys to just try this on for a minute. Just breathe into this possibility. What would it be like if you, in January, were not doing W-9s on January 31st? Or sorry, 1099s. Why do I keep saying W-9s? Just imagine for a minute. Now, I don't know, you know, some of you don't have as many clients, or a lot of, you know, you've got it all organized and you've got them on a rhythm, so this might be an old memory. But I don't think that you can be an accountant or be in the profession and have never had the experience of that last push to get those 1099s out the door on time. And so that is not, I mean, that's not a required reality. That's created. And if we choose now to create a new rhythm, and I'm going to talk about rhythm a little bit in a minute, if we choose now to create a new rhythm in 2016, where you're much more in the driver's seat in terms of how your work schedule flows, and you're not reacting to what your client says and does when they get around to doing it, then your experience as a professional mompreneur is going to improve tenfold. One of the greatest drains that we have as professional service providers is the constant reactivity that we have to client demands that are almost always last minute. And so how do we bring some balance into all of that? How do we bring a little bit more control into some of that? And still be available when the need arises. And one of the biggest places to do this, bar none, is in planning for the inevitable. And really taking that time. And I would also add another best practice for every single person that provides a service. And that is, it is so, so, so easy for us to stay in a mode of providing service, that we don't stop to sharpen our tools. We don't stop to manage our calendar or plan or strategize. This is the distinction, working on your business versus in your business. And I'm going to challenge everybody in this community to put one day per quarter in your calendar, in existence, where it's scheduled, where you leave your physical space. So if you have a home office, you do not do this at your home office. You physically leave your space. You go to a spa, go to Starbucks, go anywhere that brings you joy and it's got a nice environment and you can actually function and think there. But do not do this in your work environment. Do not do this where your kids are going to get to you or your husband's going to get to you. Take this time for yourself. One day, and that one day can be 4-hour chunk of time if you really can't be away from little ones or how it works. But a minimum of 2 hours once per quarter, and I would encourage you to go 4 hours, 6 hours, 8 hours if you can. And take that time to look at what's working and not working in your relationships with your clients, in the communication. Where is there a lot of reactivity? Where is there a lot of last minute needs? Where can you begin to create new agreements and new and structures and systems to manage the flow of your time? Time for you is your absolute greatest resource and asset. More than money, more than anything else. Because when you're a mom, your priority are your children and your family. And yes, your clients are important, but there's only so much time. And so how you manage that asset is just as valuable as if you're having a conversation teaching your client about how to manage the asset of money. You know, you take great lengths to become experts at this conversation and this subject and teaching these clients about how to protect those assets, how to grow those assets. And I'm sharing with you, if you think of time like you think of money and you become your own client for one day every quarter, then you will begin to create a new way to be both a professional mompreneur and find that balance that I'm sure everyone is looking for. So 1099s, W-2s I won't talk about except to say outsource to a payroll service provider and you won't have to worry about it. But aside from that, if you're not doing that and you're helping the client with the payroll service piece, you know, the same rule applies. Whatever needs to happen to make sure that your year-end process is done and all the appropriate statements are filed and all of that, just put that all in existence. Don't wait to the last minute. Don't wait for it to happen to you. Create it strategically. Plan for it. When I use the word put it in existence, I'm literally and actually talking about your calendar. And in a minute, I'll show you mine, just to give you an idea when I get more into rhythm and design. So same thing there. But I will say one thing about payroll, and that is another big missing, huge missing in the understanding of entrepreneurs is they just don't understand their salary requirements and payroll requirements, especially those who are owners of S-corps. And, you know, a lot of them operate like a solopreneur, think like a solopreneur, and just don't understand that there is a salary requirement. And a lot of accountants forget to even think about it. If you're not their payroll service provider or their tax planner or preparer, or you're not engaged in that part of the conversation, you might not even think to ask. But I'm going to ask you to put this on your sort of your year-end checklist. And if you're not the one accountable for it, you want to be, again, the quarterback, again, adding this little piece of value to your client in bringing up the question of whether or not they took enough salary in this year. So right now we're talking about 2015. Did they take enough salary in 2015 to be in compliance with whatever the rules are? And we asked this question in December, knowing that what really should be happening is that this is something that should be strategically looked at least once a quarter. So you're looking at how that company is performing every quarter. You're looking at their net income every quarter. You really want to assess what portion of that makes sense for them to take as a salary versus as a shareholder distribution, which is, I'm not going to get into the mechanics of all this. These are all different trainings. So if this is something that's a little bit of a foreign concept for you, there are other trainings that deal with this topic, and just make sure you let us know you want to see that training again. But, you know, in the conversation of salary versus shareholder distribution, there is a balance. There is a sort of some level of, there's a lot of subjectivity, but ultimately a decision needs to be made on what that appropriate salary amount is for the year. And so imagine if you've done everything right, you've set, in an ideal scenario, you've set the owner or owners of an S corporation that are profitable on some kind of set recurring, auto-recurring payroll. Now, if you haven't done that for your clients this year, please set a plan to do that in January. And put it on automatic so that you don't have to think about it and they don't have to think about it. Even if they're only taking out $500 a month to pay as payroll, that's fine. But get them into a rhythm. And as long as they're in a rhythm, and let's just say you did that. In January 2015, you set them up, they're on a rhythm, and that was based on their net income, historical net income from the prior year, the prior quarter, and you checked in, Q1, Q2, Q3, everything looked good. But what happened, let's just say Q4 just blew up. And it can happen. It certainly, we don't know the cycles and the seasons of all of our clients, especially if this is the first year you've worked with a client. Then who knows what their season is in December, November. So this is a really great time just to check in, just double check, make sure that even though it's set on autopilot, there are ways to set up bonuses or other ways to increase the distribution through salary to set the appropriate compensation level for 2015. So this is also something you want to be thinking about, looking at in December, and again, thinking about 2016 and beyond. Get those clients that aren't on this into a automatic payroll system. Now, keep in mind that you might have evaluated and they weren't really profitable this year. It didn't make sense for them to do it this year, but you can evaluate and see what their projected revenue is next year, and that might change the game. So again, this is a quarterly decision, but a little extra step in December to just double check and see if there's any additional salary that may be needed just to close out the year properly. The other thing, that from a technical perspective, that is a really great and best practice is the fact that people, as I said at the very beginning, a lot of entrepreneurs, their biggest pain is, there's so many, but one of them is definitely this whole waiting till the pain of not doing it is greater than the pain of doing it. And we all know what that means. We've got people who have contacted us earlier in the year. We've done some consultations with them, and they just weren't ready for whatever reason, or they didn't call us back, or they this or they that. The perfect time to follow up with those people who didn't make a decision to work with you is now, in December. Because guess what they're thinking about? Because I can almost guarantee you that the overwhelming majority of those people who weren't ready in April or July are ready now. Because why are they ready? Because they probably didn't do anything. And they're abundantly aware that they didn't do anything. So the best practice here is meet people where they are. The reality is not every entrepreneur can handle the full scope of what you actually can provide as a professional service provider. And if you meet them where they are and just get them in the door to just start the process of just taking a small bite, just taking one step. And if you think about anything that's been difficult for you to overcome, it'll generate a considerable amount of empathy for these entrepreneurs who are just as busy. Many of them are mompreneurs themselves, and it just doesn't, how are they going to juggle it all? And sometimes we can overwhelm people by saying, and I can do your taxes, and I can plan, and I can do your projections, and I can help you with cash flow, and then I'm going to build this sophisticated reporting so you can measure this, and then by the time you're done, they feel like they've just been smacked with a fire, they just drank from a fire hose. So begin to develop the muscle of hearing where the greatest pain is, and look to just piecemeal things so that they're getting them in pieces and bites. Now, you'll be able to gauge this as you have more practice and you work with more clients, and those of you who've been doing this for a long time really do this very naturally probably by now. And knowing which client is more sophisticated and wants the whole big plan and wants a proposal and wants it all laid out versus the client that just wants one piece at a time. And knowing how to feed the information in a way that they say yes is for their benefit. Because the reality is this: we all believe and know that providing this service to entrepreneurs is of such great value to them and their ability to grow. And we know ourselves the incredible cost that it is for them not to have a professional accountant or tax planner on their team. The cost in overpaying on taxes or in tax penalties and fines, the cost in not having good controls over their money and having partners embezzle from them or employees, not understanding the rules and getting fines and penalties from secretaries of states and all this other stuff. You know, we do a lot more than just put a bunch of numbers on ink on paper. We're really providing a value to these entrepreneurs and potentially saving them tens of thousands of dollars of capital that they might lose if they don't have you. And so any way that you can stand in that place of knowing the value that you bring to an entrepreneur, and you can get them to see that if they just take one step forward, that their life will get easier, then you will have done them a service by having them hire you. And I want you always to remember the value that you bring to these entrepreneurs. And I always want you to remember that that the entrepreneur needs to know this, but sometimes they need your help in getting them over the hump of saying yes. So sometimes I'm going to ask you to put your mommy hat on. And when you know something's in someone's best interest, you know, our community of mompreneurs is, you know, there's such big hearts, there's so much caring, there's so much wanting to help, there's so much love for the client and for the community, that sometimes we don't take a stand. We don't speak passionately and with conviction about why they need to work with you. And this is one of those times where that will not fall on deaf ears, where that might just be the extra little piece that gets them over the hump, that has them say yes to work with you. And look at when they say yes, they'll be free. They don't know it yet. They have to actually make the commitment and start the process for them to actually experience being free from the constraints that they have tied themselves up inside of because of their limiting money belief conversations and all the concerns that they have about, you know, about it. They can't yet often see the other side of it until they're already in the process. And you guys know this. You've worked with these people time and time and time again. You know they came in resistant and struggling and whatever, and then after working with you, after having access to their financials, after getting their financial integrity restored, these people are new people. They're freed up, and that's what you get to provide. So remember that when you have these conversations, and take a look at your the people that you talked to that weren't ready. And, you know, this is a good time of year for us to be sending out emails just saying, hey, you probably didn't work with us because the timing wasn't right, but if you haven't gotten your books straightened for the year, this is a perfect time to do it. So again, don't think of December as a vacation holiday. This is a time where people are in a lot of pain. And when I say pain, I'm not talking physical pain. I'm talking about the pain that comes along with not doing something that you know you're supposed to do month after month after month after month after year after year after year before you're like weighed down by this thing that you know you're supposed to do you haven't done. And everybody has something like that in their life. Well, they have that now. And rather than have all these people coming through the door in January, let them know that you have time now. This is the time that you can get them caught up and get them on the right path in January. and that your time's going to be limited in January. And so, let's not have them herd in along with everyone else. Let's get this solved now, and you'll be doing them in honor and a service. So those are my, and the best projects to start with are QuickBooks setups and trainings in December, because oftentimes you're not going to recreate the past, especially in December. Going back to January 2015 and December 2015 is not necessarily the highest and best use of the time and capital resources of the entrepreneur. It really just depends on where they are and what their needs are for that information. But sometimes it is necessary to go back and recreate the books for the entire year. December is a great month to get that done so that you can start on maintenance in January nice and clean and clear. So I hope those are some practical, tactical, technical best practices that you really want to think about and strategically put in existence